Yeah, we done for a question.
Hello.
We're here, Sharon. We cannot, I have not been able to hear you except when you said hello, Sharon.
Welcome to the Living Well series. My name is Sharon Fornash, and I'm a librarian with the Plano Public Library. Before we get started, we're going to wait a few more minutes to allow time for people to join and go over some housekeeping reminders. Note that this program is being recorded and will be made available on the Plano Public Library YouTube page for later viewing. Soliciting business or selling merchandise during library virtual programs is prohibited. Please show respect for our presenter and one another throughout the program. Participants' microphone and video camera options are turned off. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into the chat section. I will be monitoring the chat to assist with any tech issues and bring questions to the presenter's attention. We will also be sure to leave time for some questions at the end. Keeping your mind and body active and engaged is important. Plano Public Library is pleased to partner with several organizations with resources to assist you. Along with opportunities to learn something new at the library, these Living Well programs will connect you with information, programs, and services to assist you in getting the most out of life. Today, we're going to hear about progress and discoveries happening around the world surrounding early detection, risk reduction, clinical trials, treatments, and the pursuit of a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Our presenter today is Ginny Funk from the Alzheimer's Association. Ginny is the program director of the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you for being with us today, Ginny.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Sharon, and the library really appreciate this. You ready for me to start sharing?
Ginny is going to share her PowerPoint with us.
Okay, can you see that? Sharon, can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
I can hear you, Ginny.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, good morning. Very glad to be here with you and to be able to share really, truly
Ginny,
what is
you
happening.
may be muted.
Okay, I had one participant say that they could hear me. Do you all want to put in the chat if the rest of you can hear me? Can you hear me, everybody? Can you all hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Can you hear me? Sharon, can you hear me now? Maricel, can you still hear me okay? Do you want me to go ahead and advance?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if the other participants can. I'm not sure why Sharon can't. I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jenny Funk with the Alzheimer's Association. And again, appreciate this opportunity to be able to share this information. It is a lot, so I am going to go ahead and get started. To give you a little bit of information about the Alzheimer's Association, because we are the worldwide voluntary health organization and we are dedicated to care, support, and research. We are going to be talking today, and I'm sharing a lot of information about research studies that are currently happening, kind of the history of where we've come from. It also kind of gives a little bit of history as to how long this disease has been around, and it's taken quite a while to get to where we are. And we know for people like myself who have been through this personally, it couldn't be soon enough that we have a cure. So I also want to point out that is our logo, and it's really important. We know that everyone receives lots of solicitations and information. And if you ever want to know that it's the Alzheimer's Association, that is our abstract, our little logo that represents people and science, that beaker. Again, because everything that we do, our care and support, our advocacy, our research, it's all evidence-based, meaning it's rooted in the most up-to-date research in the field. And we are a global research force. So I'll be able to show you some of that too. Today, I'm going to go through the landscape of Alzheimer's and dementia, go through some highlights of why is early detection so important, getting that correct diagnosis, looking at advances in clinical trials and treatments. And we've got to talk about lifestyle interventions and then how you can get involved. So, there are so many different types of dementia, which are a collection of symptoms. So I want to kind of go through, and some may already know this, but I want to make sure that we're kind of on a level playing field for everyone. So the best way to really, what we still consider getting it's the most commonly asked question that we get. What's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? So this diagram does an excellent job of showing that dementia is actually not a diagnosis. It's an umbrella term, and it means a collection of symptoms. It's what the person is experiencing, not what's causing the experience. So dementia itself, the definition is an individual is having serious cognitive decline to the point where it's interfering with activities of daily living. So for diagnosis and the importance of trying to figure out, well, what's causing dementia symptoms, we call the long handle underneath the umbrella really Alzheimer's disease, because Alzheimer's disease, that biological brain disease that causes changes in the brain, accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementia symptoms. So it's by far the most prevalent. You hear about it the most. We also, our business name is Alzheimer's Association, but our legal name goes on because it includes and all related dementias, because we don't just serve individuals with Alzheimer's, we include all of these. So when you look at this, again, Alzheimer's disease, the most prevalent, it's considered that vascular is the second most prevalent cause of dementia symptoms, if anyone is familiar with vascular dementia. Or there's Lewy body dementia, there's frontotemporal. Most people have heard of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's falls under the umbrella of causing an individual to later, as Parkinson's progresses, have dementia symptoms. You'll also see that there's mixed dementia, and mixed dementia is considered to be possibly accounting for 50 to 80% of all cases. So in my case, my mom it was determined that she had mixed dementia, which means you have more than one at the same time, as if one isn't horrible enough. So just want to make sure, though, that everyone knows that we provide care and support and research for all causes of dementia, not just Alzheimer's disease. But that kind of lays the groundwork for where we're going. In March of every year, the Alzheimer's Association, we do produce and publish an annual facts and figures report. It's a pretty large booklet. This is one snippet of information that comes out, and it's really important, particularly when we're talking about research to find a cure, that we're able to show the statistics behind. There are more than 6 million Americans who have Alzheimer's disease. In the state of Texas, there's over 400,000 individuals. And in Texas, that accounts for just over 1 million caregivers. We know that 1 in 3 seniors will die with Alzheimer's disease. We know that it kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. So again, I'll just say this is on our website. And if you are a numbers person and you really want to get into some of this information, we have facts and figures again every year, and they're more staggering every year. We know that it's such a continuum. So the next thing I want to show you is we know now more than ever that Alzheimer's disease occurs over a continuum. And it means, again, this doesn't just happen all at once. Changes are happening over time. People start off asymptomatic, and then sometimes an individual will show mild cognitive impairment. Now, individuals who have mild cognitive impairment it may be a cause from potential side effects from medications. It might be from a lot of different things. But what we know is that not everyone who has MCI goes on to develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's more of like an early stage of cognitive loss. What we do know is that when someone does progress and they have dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, that we put them into 3 stages: mild, moderate, and severe. And what we do know is that everyone who experiences Alzheimer's disease will have passed through a stage of MCI. So what that means in terms of research is that we are trying to get to individuals so much earlier in the process. And unfortunately, our history is that over the years, many people do not even get a diagnosis until they're even sometimes more in the moderate stages of the actual disease happening. So this has really shifted the focus in looking at why early detection is so important, because we need to get to individuals so much earlier in the process. When unfortunately, we know sometimes what will happen is just, oh, they're just aging, or, oh, it's just they're getting a little bit older. But if this is truly something that's happening in the brain, we know that that's just not the case. So, okay, now I just want to review. These are the 3 hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. And we know that there are changes in the brain that happen. The first is amyloid plaques. There's a slide of that on the left. Then there's tau tangles that occur in the brain. And then neurodegeneration, which basically means that nerve cell death occurs and the brain actually goes through atrophy. It shrinks as the disease progresses. So if you look at this, it's hard to see this, but we show families this sometimes to be able to really talk about when it seems like an individual is doing something to be manipulative or they're doing it on purpose. If they truly have Alzheimer's disease, it is a brain disease that is destroying brain cells and they don't have control over it. So Again, I want to show these because in a little bit, we'll show some of the different research studies that have been done in each of these areas. So this is probably the second most commonly asked question we get. Well, if it's in my family, does that mean I'm going to get it? Most people have that fear. And honestly, not necessarily. We truly don't call this a genetic disease because of all of the modifiable risk factors that there are. So what we know based on the research that we're seeing across the globe, we know that there are things in our risk that are non-modifiable as well as modifiable. So when we look at this, we know that Alzheimer's and dementia is not normal aging, but age is the biggest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. So once an individual hits the age of 65, that's when their risk really skyrockets. And after the age of 85, it's 1 out of 3 individuals develop Alzheimer's disease. We know that genetics play a role, but just because it's in a family, it does not mean that any future generations are going to develop the disease. There are many families where there's no history of it and someone develops it. There's no someone develops it in the family, but no one since then has had it. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. But I also want to touch upon race and ethnicity and sex and gender, because those are all influenced as well. And I'll show you on the next slide, but we know that 2/3 of the people who have Alzheimer's disease are women. We don't still understand the reasons for this, and we know now that it's not just because women live longer, so there are more older women, and therefore the numbers are higher. There's more to it than that. Race and ethnicity, I'll show you on the next slide. We know that different groups of individuals have higher prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. But take a look at this. All of the rest of these are considered to be modifiable risk factors or things that we may be able to change or have an influence on. So certainly physical activity, that ranks up as one of the most important things that we can do for our heart health and therefore our brain health. What's good for our heart is good for our brain. Cardiovascular health, sleep, diet, environment, lifestyle factors, traumatic brain injury. So when you look at all of these things, these are all of these areas are currently in study right now to be able to determine, okay, what if we did this? Or what if we, like sleep, there's a lot of, and you may hear of these things, there's sleep studies that are being done, the importance that we get quality sleep and how that affects our overall health, including our brain health. So again, we need to study and we are studying all of these risk factors from all these different angles to be able to really find a cure. So a constellation of reasons, social determinants of health, and then strengthening our understanding across all these different risk factors is very, very important. Again, 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. We know that with Hispanic individuals develop Alzheimer's disease at a rate of 1.5 times their Caucasian counterparts. And for African Americans, it's very disproportionate. It's twice. It's 2 times the amount that their Caucasian counterparts develop Alzheimer's disease. So again, when you look at those risk factors and things like heart disease, diabetes is now very much considered a risk factor for later developing Alzheimer's disease. Many other things are contributing, but what we also know is that these groups have historically been underrepresented in clinical studies. So we have quite a focus now on making sure that when we talk about dementia research, that it is inclusive of really focusing on all kinds of different communities, making sure that when we do reach that day where we can say we have a cure, that it is applicable to everyone. So I know I'm talking fast. I'm just trying to get through to a lot of information. This is a very exciting time in research. So let's go on to the next slide. Global impact. We know with other diseases that the reason that their death rates are on a decline is due to specifically the research that's been done to find treatments and find cures. So we know what this impact is, and we know for the Alzheimer's Association right now, we currently have $320 million that is active and committed, funding more than 1,000 different studies in 54 different countries. It kind of gives me goosebumps, but again, we fund the very best projects regardless of where they are happening. And because we can do this beyond the United States, because we know this, the cure could come from anywhere, we know that that means someone somewhere at every moment of the day is doing Alzheimer's and dementia research, and very much thanks to the association. So really important stuff. Now, looking at the United States, we know that at any given moment, discovery is happening. I have news to share that just literally was released yesterday about a new treatment. But we know that in the United States, the largest funder of research comes out of the federal budget. And over the last, if you look at our advocacy and the impact that it's had over the past few years, you can see the funding level at the National Institutes of Health from federal research budget has increased enormously, to the point of now we're up at 3.7 billion annually that's given to NIH and National Institute of Aging to support research and in Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's all local funding. So of course, we partner and fund a lot of things together with NIH for things that, of course, stay within the United States. Again, can't more highly recommend, become part of our advocacy team, which basically it's from people sharing their stories. Without a doubt, you've probably seen and heard more about Alzheimer's than in the 100 years that it's 100 plus years that it's been around. I do want to share the slide on about Texas and kind of currently where we are as far as grant funding and things like that. We have played a role in nearly every significant development in Alzheimer's disease. And when you look at right here in the state of Texas, right now, total awards 130. Active right now, there are 48 studies across Texas that the Alzheimer's Association is funding. You can look at the active amount is 11.6 million. Since our grant research funding started, they've given out 25 million to the state of Texas, and you kind of see the different funding institutions that receive that, how many grant reviewers there are, because that's really important in the process too. And then iStart is like an international society of nurses, doctors, and you can kind of see membership of what we have with that. So let's go to the next slide and talk about early detection and diagnosis. So we know there's a long list of benefits to getting at this much earlier. Oh, bless me. Than what we have typically seen. We know that an early diagnosis helps people understand, okay, is it Alzheimer's disease or is it another dementia? That helps on planning on how to potentially look at care services, looking at clinical trials. We know that research, again, is the only way that we're going to find a cure for this. And in early stages, there are quite a few studies that are very specifically need people who are in early stages. We know that being able to make their own legal and financial decisions, an individual who's in early stages can still absolutely make all kinds of decisions. And we need to make sure that we know what they want. Having discussions about care, about finances. Alzheimer's disease is one of the most expensive diseases in the United States because of its cause of being 24 hours a day care, even sometimes in the early stages, and also the many years that it can last. So we look at modernizing the diagnosis. We could only in the past diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Well, maybe even 30 years ago, it was determined it wasn't even until after someone passed away. Well, now fast forward, actually, doctors and neurologists and geriatricians can make an accurate diagnosis while someone is living. But what we're seeing now is that biomarkers are part of the diagnostic workup that are so incredibly important. So enrolling people in clinical trials for prevention, if we can identify who's at risk and define who might be the right fit for a certain type of clinical trial, that needs to happen much earlier, because now it's estimated that it's 20 years or more before symptoms appear that the brain changes of Alzheimer's disease may begin. So let's talk biomarkers. Biomarkers are really changing the game for the field of Alzheimer's and for research in general. These tools will absolutely, they're going to change our experience. When we go into a physician's office to get a diagnosis, they're going to be a critical part of how we get an accurate diagnosis. So when we say biomarkers, these tools, these technologies, basically they tell us changes that are happening in the body. And you may be familiar with maybe not knowing the word biomarker, but basically when you look at things like understanding your risk for heart disease, well, that's by measuring cholesterol in your body, looking at your glucose numbers, looking at blood tests. We need these type of tools and technologies for Alzheimer's disease. We do know, and we'll talk about brain imaging here in a second, but biofluid analysis, with that type of biomarker, we're looking at specific proteins in spinal fluid to be able to possibly tell us about changes that are happening in the brain. So you're going to be hearing more and more and more about biomarkers and tests that one day we will be able to walk into a doctor's office and actually even maybe get a retinal imaging scan that could give us an idea of risk for developing Alzheimer's disease in the future. Sounds kind of futuristic, but it's happening in clinical studies right now. So this is an area where we know there's so much more, because right now there's only a limited amount of biomarkers that are part of the making the diagnosis. So certainly the brain, the PET scan, biomarkers that have been a big part of this movement, basically creating a better toolkit for physicians to be able to help them make an accurate diagnosis. So brain imaging, if you've heard of a brain scan, it allows doctors to diagnose and treat memory conditions. The type of scan we're talking about can even look at and see amyloid and tau PET imaging in the brain, which again, going back, those are two of the hallmarks considered to be hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease in the brain. It can also help exclude Alzheimer's disease as a diagnosis, because not only is it underdiagnosed, but sometimes it gets overdiagnosed because doctors may not have this tool available to be able to make an accurate diagnosis. So ideas. let's talk about the IDEAS study. The first IDEAS study was, it enrolled over 18,000 individuals. And that's really key because we know that if you're on the internet or sometimes even TV, you may hear things about, well, the cure has happened, or we can stop Alzheimer's disease from advancing. Well, it's always important to find out, well, if there's a study that shows that, how many people were actually enrolled? So those kinds of information you can always get through the Alzheimer's Association to be able to determine, well, is it something where it was a large amount of people, or something where we're talking 50 people, which would be much, much different. So originally, the IDEA study was done to actually be able to do scans and make an accurate diagnosis. And so again, the original IDEA study was done with over 18,000 individuals, and looking at the utility of doing this amyloid PET scan and being able to make an absolute, much more accurate diagnosis. Well, building off of what we learned from the first IDEA study is that we know that it didn't necessarily represent the full Medicare population in terms of individuals' race and ethnicity. So the new IDEA study, which is launched in a couple of cities in the United States, is built off of learning and making sure that they're recruiting over 7,000 individuals, making sure that over 50% of them are coming from populations of either African Americans or Hispanics. So again, we truly need to be able to look at the differences, not only in the biology, but in the imaging, to make sure that when someone is going to a doctor's office for a diagnosis, that it fits, that it's accurate to everyone. And again, we know individuals who are Hispanic or African American have a higher prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. So we need to make sure that the individuals participating in these studies, that it's equitable. Okay, next, I want to show you a new era of cerebrospinal fluid and blood tests. We know that PET scans have great value. We also know that they're not available in all communities. They're still much too expensive, and there are barriers to going through a PET scan. So we need to be able to have other ways of looking at biomarkers that are at low cost, that are non-invasive, and that they do provide reliable results. So there are tests that are, again, looking at more than just beta and amyloid as well. So tests looking at fluid surrounding the brain, spinal cord fluid. Currently, there is an FDA-approved test for spinal cord fluid, and 3 emerging blood tests that can be used to predict the likelihood that plaques are in the brain. And while these tests represent tremendous progress, again, we know that more data is needed before they can be used broadly, to where we can be able to walk into a doctor's office. We're not quite there yet. Other advances in biomarkers, there are studies being done on blood, so that, again, it would be incredible to be able to go in and get a blood test to make a determination, which it's not currently available. Saliva tests, again, cerebrospinal fluid, and there's just really an urgency to accelerate these so that individuals can get diagnosed earlier. The reasons for this I'm about to get towards as far as progress is because some of the treatments that are now FDA approved. So let me go through this next part, focusing on risk reduction. It's estimated that up to 40% of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed by targeting modifiable risk factors. So, and if you were to combine many of these, that makes it even better. So what we've seen from a commission report on dementia is, again, 40%. So I want to we do a whole other class called Living Well for Your Brain and Body, looking at the latest research. And they look at environmental factors, physical activity, cardiovascular health, diet, what we put into the body and how that affects our overall health, our heart health, and therefore our brain health. And cognitive and social stimulation. We know that isolation is one of the very worst things that you can do for overall health, but very much so for the brain. So again, based on research, it's likely that maybe combining multiple health factors for risk reduction might be one of the most impactful ways of lowering our risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. So let's talk about the US Pointer study. The US Pointer study kicked off, and then unfortunately COVID happened. So it's just now finally gearing back up, but it is, again, a test that looks at a whole program that looks at combining all kinds of different multiple health factors, and that having the most impact on delaying the onset of mild cognitive impairment and also dementia. So the US Pointer study it's partnered with different health, with different gyms, to actually have both a self-guided and a structured intervention. It shows, I don't know if you can see on the map, but we were fortunate in the state of Texas to get a US Pointer study. It's based out of Houston, and it looks at incorporating physical activity, nutrition, engagement, intellectual challenging, health coaching, bringing together or enrolling over 2,000 participants in 5 sites across the United States to be able to give information about, we can't just say, well, it's important that you exercise, but to really be able to give people specifics about, no, this really truly made an impact. So that's the whole point of this, to be able to really, hopefully, if the intervention proves effective, that we're able to make this a sustainable program across all areas of the United States. You can also see many ancillary studies have happened. There's a sleep study, there's a neuroimaging study. So there's been a branching off of many more pointer studies. Just also to give you an idea, the only place in the world where it's called the Pointer study is in the United States. In the rest of the world, it's called the Fingers study, which didn't translate well in the US. So, but in the rest of the world, you can see this is happening worldwide. This study was first developed in Finland, which hence it was named the Fingers study. But you can see all of the different countries that are either currently planning or implementing a study, or they're already in the planning phases and have begun. Now let's look at treatment and the treatment pipeline, as we call it. We know it takes years and years and millions of dollars for a treatment to make its way from preclinical to phase 1, 2, and 3 of a study. We know that with different medications, with different treatments, they have to make it all the way through. And just as an example, we know that the first approval of a new drug in a category of treatment aimed at slowing the disease progression is aducanumab, or Aduhelm. And you may have heard of it. It was just a couple of years ago that FDA gave it accelerated approval. It had a lot that came with it because it is one of the drugs that targets amyloid in the brain. Again, we saw that earlier, one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. But Let's talk about that more in a second. But just to give you an idea of, there are so many more things coming down the pipeline. Earlier this year, FDA approved a second drug that slows down the disease progression, and that is lecanemab, or Leqembi. Changes the course of Alzheimer's disease in a meaningful way for people in the early stages of the disease. And if you ask people who are in early stages and ask them, would you like to have, for example, 5 more years in the early stages before the disease progresses? Overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. Or if you ask family members, would you have wanted more time with your loved one when they were in the early stages? Overwhelmingly, yes. So that's kind of where we are headed as far as what's available. Now, we're also in the middle of an advocacy, a huge advocacy push right now, because those medications are incredibly expensive and not readily available. So let's look at this history. There is a picture, that little tiny picture, that is Dr. Alzheimer. That's how we ended up with this difficult word to say and spell. It was the doctor's last name, so we can't curse it too much. He actually was the one who discovered this brain disease in his patients. And so therefore it was named Alzheimer's disease. That was in 1906. The very first treatment of dementia symptoms didn't happen until 1996, and that was Aricept. Some of you may have heard of that. Look at that shift in time and how long it took all the way up to 2014 for Namzaric to be FDA approved. Now, again, those are treatments for symptoms, but not actually considered treatments to slow the disease. Well, we know we're in a new phase of treatment for Alzheimer's disease. This is phenomenal. We know that right now, Aduhelm and Leqembi, again, have received accelerated progression FDA approval. So what that means, though, unfortunately, is that right now you have to be in a clinical trial in order to receive these medications. So we are actively advocating for that to change. When you look at the pipeline, there are over 140 different therapies today that are being tested in clinical trials to try to target the multiple aspects of Alzheimer's biology, trying to really get to the cure, finding the way to stop this, and also in the future, prevention. So right there, new phase of treatment. When you look at some of these, I can't even pronounce. There are so many, again, different therapies being looked at, and donanemab was just given approval by FDA. It should be on the news probably any day now, as the third targeted treatment of Alzheimer's disease. But again, these are for people in early stages, so we have to reach people earlier in the process. Let me just go through a little bit more. We know that every study helps, even if it is a study that sometimes you hear the not so great news that a study has failed. It never truly fails, in that we can researchers really can learn from what happened and apply it to the next things that come. So I want to share with you a program called TrialMatch. If you are in any way interested in learning about trials that are happening in the state of Texas or beyond, TrialMatch, it is a clinical studies matching service. Of course, I'm enrolled in TrialMatch, and a couple of years ago, I got the little ping on my emails that I was a potential match, and I was able to do an online study on my computer that was for an institution, a university on the East Coast, and actually say that, okay, I participated in a study. So not all studies are going into a doctor's office. Some are online. There's just so many different studies that are being done. They need everyone. So we encourage you to please check out TrialMatch. we are in a whole new phase now of knowing that all of this is happening. We have to make sure that when FDA approves these medications and these treatments, that they become accessible and not have all this blockage from being able to have people access them. We definitely know that in the future, it's going to be an effect, like a combination of different treatments, like with other diseases, that's going to end this. In the meantime, we are going to keep providing all the care and support that we do. And we also are heavily involved in making sure that we are educating physicians on all of these new ways to make a diagnosis as well. If you want any information on anything I've talked about today, here are our research resources, our website. If you go on the research section of our website, it is excellent. You can read about TrialMatch. Again, you can join and you're not enrolling in anything. You're just seeing if you might potentially be a match for something. We also have our 24-hour helpline that is staffed by master's level clinicians and higher. They answer the phone 24 hours a day. So if you need help and it's 3 in the morning or you need to talk to someone, you can call us 24 hours a day. And in summary, I want to leave you with as much hope as possible. Again, looking at the map, there is so much more focus than ever before, and we have more hope than ever before. This is an incredibly exciting time in research. There are new tools for detection. There are more biomarker tools that are coming. Growing diversity in therapies, and certainly new ways to promote diverse participation. So quite a lot of hope happening. And then just this last slide is again, our 800 number and our website. And I feel like I have just talked and talked and talked. So I will shush and see if there are any questions or anything that anyone wants to discuss.
Yes, and feel free to use that Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, or the chat should be working.
Sharon, were you able to hear me at some point, I hope?
Absolutely.
Oh, good, good. Any questions or comments?
Well, they can continue to think about your questions. Feel free to post them again in the Q&A or the chat. In the meantime, I would like to share with you that the Plano Public Library offers more programs that you may be interested. So come meet new friends or connect in a new way with those around you by joining the Connecting Seniors or one of our very many library book clubs. The Connecting Seniors program is an online and in-person program for people to get together, share life experiences, stories, and memories, and have fun. Upcoming topics include Wheel Favorites on July 6th and Life's Journey on August 3rd. And once again, have a lovely conversation at one of the library's online book clubs. Whatever your reading preference, there is most definitely a book club to match it, and people are interested in hearing your thoughts. We also offer a program called Memory Keepers for people living with early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's and their partners. So Memory Keepers, offered in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association, is a monthly online conversational program for people and their care partners to explore and conserve memories together. The aim of the program is to give people living with dementia or Alzheimer's a comfortable space to express feelings, interact with others, remember the past, express their personality, reduce anxiety and restlessness. So Memory Keepers meets virtually on the third Monday of the month at 10:30 a.m. So we also have a great deal of other opportunities for you to learn about online. If you would like to expand your social circle and engage with others, the Plano Public Library offers a variety of programs and classes that do not require a library card. You can participate via Zoom, watch at any time on YouTube, or take an in-person class at your nearest library. So learn about personal finance, starting a small business, pick up skills in Microsoft Word or Excel, or find out how you can check out books, audiobooks, and magazines using the Libby app on your tablet, phone, or computer. Plano Public Library now offers older adult bags, as you see pictured in front of you here. They are to encourage conversation and engagement between older adults with signs of dementia or Alzheimer's and their caregivers. So bags fit into two major themes: sensory and reminisce. And those sensory bags contain items and activities that help reduce anxiety and improve mobility, stimulate the senses, and provide cognitive engagement. So they include topics such as calming anxieties, sound, building strength, brain gains, motor skills. And then the reminisce bags are designed to spark conversation and social engagement through topics like gardening, baseball, road trips, traveling by train, and life on the farm. And so these, you can place a hold on them by searching the catalog and simply place that hold next to the desired item. Let's see. Find out more about the library and what we have to offer at Plano Library Learns blog, which posts engaging content and resources about art and culture, early learning students, STEAM learning, technology, and reading. And visit the blog for articles, recommendations, and reading lists to learn more about online programs, classes, and book clubs. And once again, you can engage and connect with us via Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So, listen and subscribe to the Plano Library Speaks podcast to find out more about what's going on in your library. So are there any other questions that you would like to ask Ginny?
Oh, it was a lot of information, but I'm here to answer or anything that anyone wants to talk through.
Oh, let's see.
Thank you.
Great big appreciation for your presentation. Okay. Well then, Jenny, I thank you so much for coming and sharing. It's a wealth of knowledge, and we're extremely grateful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of classes. So, and now, there's resources. We have classes, education, support groups, helpline. If anyone ever needs anything, or someone who does, now about the Alzheimer's Association, and research is just one part of what we do. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share with y'all.
Thank you. And participants, if you have just a minute, we'd like to thank you for attending again this virtual program. And if you wouldn't mind, please use the QR code on your screen to complete a survey. That'll help us to evaluate our programs and plan for the future, because we might need to have another program. We might need to have Ginny back for another session on Alzheimer's. So, thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sharon.